Good morning, artists. Today we're going to come back to our one-point perspective drawing of a landscape and talk about color. Here is my example all done and traced, but remember yours did not need to be traced. You could have just left it in pencil like this one here. So if yours doesn't have Sharpie, no big deal. That was optional. All right, so let's talk about what we learned last week. Last week, we were talking about something called perspective drawing, and in particular, one-point perspective drawing. So in a perspective drawing, you are creating the illusion of space, like things are closer to you and things are farther away. Typically in art, we are working on a flat surface, which is only two-dimensional. It has length and width. It doesn't have depth. We are creating that feeling of depth by using one-point perspective. So in our artwork, if you remember when we began, we created a horizon line first, and then we made one point right in the middle. That one point is the one point vanishing point in one-point perspective drawing. That's where all of our lines are moving toward, even the lines of the tops of our trees, as you can see here. That's what makes it look like this road is getting a little bit further away. So moving on, we are going to be now looking at color. And color is really the way to bring your artwork to life and make it even look more real, using in particular something that we've been working on a lot lately, which is value. The lightness or darkness of a color. So all that shading work that we did on our spheres and in our triangles, on one of our last projects, that's going to come in really handy here. So the first thing that I'm going to begin coloring today is going to be the trees. So instead of just grabbing any old green to color the trees, you know, kind of just randomly, I'm going to actually be really thoughtful about the green that I'm choosing. In fact, I'm not going to just choose one green. I want you to be choosing 3 different greens. So a light green, a medium green, and a darker green. You may even have more options in the materials that you have, and if you do, fantastic. So for this project, I recommend using colored pencils, but if all you have is crayons, that's fine too. Usually you can find at least 2 different greens. And remember, you can make different values by pressing down harder or lighter with your material, depending on what you're using. So I am going to show you the greens that I worked on choosing here. I'm going to see if I can. All right. So one of the things that I like to do is I always test out my colors before I use them, because sometimes looks can be deceiving. What I mean by that is sometimes a green that looks dark actually is lighter on paper when you try it. So what I did here was to just try out my different greens, and you can kind of see it going from light to dark. Again, that's called value in art. And again, it's how we make our colors look really real. All right, so I'm going to move this, and then we're going to start on coloring our trees. So using those different values of green, I like to actually color in the direction of the tree itself. So I think actually that for these pine trees, probably my darker greens are going to work better. Now, the lighter greens would be the areas on the tree that are getting the most light. And I've already kind of decided that it's going to be during sunset, so there's going to be a lot of darker values in this. The highlighted areas, though, would probably be up toward the top, of course. And again, I am actually going to make my coloring look like the texture of the actual thing. So you'll notice that I'm not coloring side to side, nice and neat, back and forth to get a nice smooth texture. I'm actually doing this in a way that kind of looks like, you know, pine boughs or pine needles. Now, there is probably the lightest color I'm going to use. I'm going to move to this one next, and I'm going to start to bring out some of the darker values here. And you might notice just a little bit of a slight difference. And I'm just going to keep going here. And then when you're really going to start to see it look real is when I bring in my darker values. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And imagine if you're looking at a tree, where would those darker values be? They're really going to be in the underneath areas, depending on where your sun is, of course, because that's your light source. All right, so I'm going to come back now and work with my darker green. And to me, I feel like the darker greens are going to be sort of under here. Let's see, I think I want this one. So I really work, I don't know if you can see me right now, but I've got them in my hands. So I kind of keep switching between them depending on what I feel would look best. So right now what I've done is I'm creating some shadowy spots here in the tree, and it will give you more of a realistic look in your tree. So you can see it start to develop, and you do want to get rid of any areas of white because of course that will definitely make your tree look less realistic. But you also want to keep it sort of see how my lines are kind of rough. Again, I'm coloring in the direction that I feel like the pine boughs, the pine needles would be facing. So I'm going up and down and sort of a little bit diagonal at times to give it that texture. And now I'm going to come back and just like press in. Press in. Oh man, that's the big issue with colored pencils. Excuse me while I sharpen this. Yes, I know, I'm using the electric sharpener with my colored pencils, which I always told you guys not to do, but it's okay. I'm in a hurry. All right, so again, I'm gonna press down harder, which you do run the risk of breaking your colored pencil, but you can see when I do that, I'm getting those really beautiful darker values in here that are gonna make my tree look more realistic. So I'm just gonna continue and see what I can come up with here. I'm probably almost off screen, so let me move it up. Sometimes I forget about that. These areas are going to be really dark because they're underneath. And then I'm going to go lighter, lighter, lighter. All right, now I just need to come back and look and see, okay, where is it really starting to look realistic? And I think in these areas where I've sort of, developed those darker values is where it's working best. So I'm going to come back in and just make some more darker areas to kind of get that tree to look a little bit more real. And I'm feeling pretty good about that. I like how it's a little bit lighter up here because that will be sort of where it's getting the most light from the sun going down. And that tree looks relatively realistic, a lot more realistic than it did before, of course, with it being white. So now I'm just going to switch to the tree trunk. And just really quick, I won't spend much time on this, but I did do the same thing with my browns. I kind of tested them out to see what would be the lightest and then to the darkest. And I'm going to stick mostly, this one's more of like a reddish brown and I don't really want that. So I'm going to stick really with these three. You can see how it goes light, medium, dark. Okay, so always a good idea to test out your artwork. And by the way, one of the things that I do a lot, especially if I've traced with Sharpie, is I actually flip it over and I trace on the other side. Hold on, this one is the one I photocopied. Let me show you this one. So this is the one I traced with Sharpie. Check out the back. It's kind of handy because you can see your lines, so you can actually test your colors right on the thing itself and get it to be just what you want. Okay, so anyway, let me continue with that. So I'm going to come back to here and I'm just going to work on this very little part. And again, bark of a tree is going to be, think about what texture that would be. Is it going to be smooth? Is it going to be rough? It's definitely going to be more rough than smooth, I would say, depending on what tree you're looking at. But this one is definitely going to be rough. So I can kind of get in here and color. Then I'm going to bring my darker value in. And again, I just want to make it sort of look more real, by creating that variety of color. Maybe I'll add a little bit more light in here just to give it a little bit more variety. And that's done. Okay, now of course you're going to have this space in between, so you're going to want to add some more browns and greens in there, or maybe there's snow. It's up to you what you put in there. You're using these same techniques for pretty much all of your artwork, okay? Now the other thing that I just want to touch base with you on is the sky really quick. In this particular artwork, I think it looks really beautiful if you do some sort of like sunset or sunrise, but you don't have to do that. I'm going to demonstrate that for you so that you can get an idea of what that might look like. I know that lately I've been seeing a lot of really amazing sunrises and sunsets, and what happens, well, it's typically that's a time of day that artists like to capture a lot because it creates these really beautiful color effects in the sky and also in objects around. So when the sun is beyond the horizon line, remember that horizon line, when the sun is beyond the horizon line, it creates a low light situation, which again creates those colors. So the brightest area in the sky is going to be right here. And so typically what you'll want to do is start out with, sort of like a yellow, or maybe this is a little bit darker of a yellow. And then I kind of go dark, and then I go light, 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 because I just want it to overlap this next color. I'm going to then sort of bring in this like peachy, sort of like pinkish, because that's kind of what I've been seeing so far. And you'll notice that now I am coloring from side to side. Whoops. I'm going to use an eraser to clean that up later. And you just kind of want to, you don't have to necessarily press down hard with this. I'm going to kind of fade. So here we are using our technique that we were using in the last project. I'm going to kind of fade this like purpley color in here. I don't want it to be too extreme. You can kind of play around with what you would like, how you would like it to look. And then from here on out, I probably would blend in a couple more blues, maybe a little bit of a darker blue. Sometimes I like to leave little patches of white like this. Sort of a more realistic way to make clouds than what I did up here by tracing them. So you can kind of see how I'm using that gradual fading and blending technique that we've done in the past as well. So there's some demonstrations for color. I'm not going to spend I'm not going to keep you on this video watching me color the whole thing because that would take forever. I want you to go forward and experiment with your own techniques here. And then when you're finished coloring, please take a photo and send it back to me. I loved all the work that I got last week, and I just can't wait to see your work when it is all colored and looking very realistic. So thanks for your hard work, guys, and I hope you have fun with this. I will see you next time.